Welcome to History for Nap Time. Tonight's story is about a man who lived more than 2,000 years ago, a man who dreamed of conquering the world before most people his age had even learned to rule themselves. His name was Alexander. History remembers him as Alexander the Great. But behind that title lies a human story of a restless boy, a soldier who never stopped marching, a dreamer who tried to unite worlds, and a young man who left behind both glory and silence. Close your eyes, breathe slowly, and let's travel back to ancient Macedonia, to the place where greatness began. Long before empires carried his name, Alexander was simply a boy in a small northern kingdom. Macedonia was wild and mountainous, its people fierce, its nights cold. In 356 BCE, under a summer moon, Olympias gave birth to her son and whispered that the gods had chosen him. His father, King Philip II, was a warrior, broad-shouldered, limping from battle, building an army stronger than Greece had ever seen. Alexander grew up watching blades flash in the courtyard and hearing the sound of hooves in the fields. He loved horses, storms, and stories of heroes. When he was still a child, a black stallion was brought to his father, untamable, snorting and striking at anyone who approached. The court laughed when the young prince insisted he could ride it. Alexander noticed what others didn't. The horse was frightened of its shadow. He turned it toward the sun, climbed on, and rode until both boy and horse were one shape against the horizon. The horse was called Bucephalus. They would never part again. When Alexander was 13, his father brought a tutor to the palace, a quiet man with keen eyes and a mind that measured the world, Aristotle. Under the shade of olive trees, he taught the prince about science, medicine, logic, and poetry. He spoke of virtue and balance, of how every choice leaves an echo in the soul. Alexander listened, but could not sit still for long. After lessons, he practiced with the sword, ran through the fields, and dreamed of adventure. He carried with him a copy of Homer's Iliad, the tale of Achilles, the hero who sought everlasting fame. The boy from Macedonia began to wonder if destiny was waiting for him too. Fate arrived sooner than he expected. When Alexander was 20, his father was murdered during a festival. The palace filled with panic. Enemies inside and outside Macedonia saw a chance to strike. But the young prince moved faster than anyone imagined. He silenced rebellion in the north, crossed into Greece, and demanded allegiance from every city-state. When Thebes rose against him, he destroyed it completely, a warning written in smoke. By the time the dust settled, all Greece obeyed him. He had become king not by inheritance alone, but by fire. Now his gaze turned east, toward the greatest empire in the world, Persia. His father had dreamed of conquering it. The son would make that dream his own. In the spring of 334 BCE, Alexander's fleet set sail across the Aegean Sea. Thousands of soldiers stood on deck as the wind filled their sails. Ahead lay the vast Persian Empire, ruled by King Darius III, a realm of palaces, deserts, and cities shining under the eastern sun. Alexander's first battle came at the river Granicus. He led his cavalry straight through the water and into enemy lines. Spears clashed, shields shattered. He fought in the front, his helmet flashing like fire. By nightfall, the Persians were broken. The campaign had begun. Through Anatolia, through mountains and cities, he advanced, never stopping long enough for doubt. At every victory, he built monuments, offered sacrifices, and wrote letters home to his mother. He was only 22. Years later, after a chain of victories, Alexander reached Egypt. The people welcomed him as a liberator, weary of Persian rule. He visited temples along the Nile, where priests crowned him pharaoh, calling him the son of the god Amun. In the cool light of morning, he chose a stretch of coastline where the sea met the river and marked the outline of a city. He named it Alexandria. It would become a center of learning and trade, a city of scrolls, scholars, and sailors, standing for centuries after his death. That night, perhaps, he felt for the first time what it meant not just to conquer, but to create. Beyond Egypt lay Persia's heart. At Issus and Gaugamela, Alexander faced armies far larger than his own. The earth shook under the feet of tens of thousands of men. He watched, calm and deliberate, then rode straight through the chaos, spear aimed at Darius himself. The Persians scattered, the great king fled, and the empire that had once ruled from the Mediterranean to the mountains of India was now Alexander's. In Babylon, he entered the golden halls once reserved for Persian kings. He sat upon their throne, but did not gloat. Instead, he began to wear their robes, learn their customs, and marry among them. He wanted his new empire to be one people, Greek and Eastern, bound together. To many of his men, this was strange. To Alexander, it was destiny. But destiny is never satisfied. He pressed onward, through deserts and mountains, chasing the horizon. In the burning sands of Gedrosia, his army nearly perished from thirst. When a helmet of water was brought to him, he looked at it, smiled faintly, and poured it into the ground so that no man would envy him. In India, the monsoon rains drenched their armor. They fought war elephants and unfamiliar kings beneath thunder and lightning. At the river Hephaestus, his soldiers finally refused to march farther. They wanted to go home. Alexander stood by the river, staring into the mist, silent for a long time. He had reached the edge of the known world. The march back west was slow and filled with sorrow. Many had died. Those who survived carried scars and memories too heavy for words. In Babylon, Alexander planned new conquests, Arabia next, perhaps beyond that another world. But his body was failing. Years of wounds, exhaustion, and fever caught him at last. During a banquet, he grew pale and weak. Within days, he could no longer stand. His generals came to him one by one. They asked who should rule after him. He whispered, barely audible, to the strongest. A few days later, the king who had crossed continents was gone. He was only 32. When news of his death spread, the empire trembled. His generals, the Diadochi, divided his lands like spoils. Wars followed, cities burned. But the cities he had built, Alexandria and many others bearing his name, survived. Greek language and thought spread through the East. Philosophers, artists, and scientists traveled freely, mixing cultures that had once been strangers. This new age, born from conquest, would be called Hellenistic, an age of learning, invention, and art. Alexander's dream lived on, reshaped by those who came after. What then made Alexander truly great? Perhaps it was not his victories, though there were many. Perhaps it was not his empire, which vanished soon after he was gone. It may have been the vision behind it all, to see beyond borders, to imagine a world connected by knowledge, by trade, by shared humanity. He was restless, flawed, and often cruel. Yet, in every decision, good or terrible, burned the same relentless spark, the desire to go farther. He carried the lessons of his teacher Aristotle, the pride of his mother Olympias, and the discipline of his father Philip. He united courage and intellect, dream and action in one brief life. 2,000 years later, his name still stands for ambition and wonder. But behind that name was simply a man, a boy who rode a frightened horse into the sun and never stopped chasing the horizon. And maybe that is what makes him great. Not the lands he conquered, but the light that still follows him long after the march has ended. You can imagine it now. The quiet plains of ancient Macedonia, the whisper of grass where his footsteps once fell. The horse Bucephalus long gone, the palace's dust, but the dream still drifting across time. History forgets many names, but some remain, not because of power, but because they remind us of what the human spirit can reach. Alexander's life was brief, filled with noise and fire. Yet what endures is the calm after it all, the stillness that comes when the world sleeps, and his story becomes just another soft echo under the stars. So rest now. The battles are over, the king is at peace, and the world he once conquered is quiet again. Good night.